Good evening. This is Redwood Wonk. Dave Frank is with me. My name is Eric Kirk. We are going to discuss the national news of the day. The biggest news is Ukraine President Zelensky addressed Congress directly today. It was a short address, 15 minutes. It was very dramatic. The war, of course, is in its in its early completing its third week. We're about to start its fourth week, I believe, 19th day, or maybe we're on its 20th day. Anyway, the Russian front is pretty much bogged down. They have been outside Kyiv for days, and apparently Putin and the Russian military have gotten frustrated. They are bombing civilians left and right. I mean, intentional attacks on civilians. A bread line was gunned down today. I mean, just absolutely horrific things happening because they can't seem to get at the Ukraine military. I think their fourth general was killed today. Just things aren't going well for them. The talks continue. Both sides say they're getting closer to some type of compromise. I don't know what that compromise would be, but apparently, what they're talking about is allowing Russia to keep portions of Ukraine, certainly Crimea. Whether it includes the other eastern parts, I don't know. But Zelensky is asking for more help. More help is on the way, $800 million. Biden announced today javelins, stingers, guns, RPGs, and intelligence. And it was confirmed today the United States has been helping with intelligence in terms of locating Russian military. It's been apparently very helpful in the effort. A lot of pressure on Biden to add the MiGs, the 28, 29 MiGs, Soviet-era MiGs that Poland has and has offered to transfer to NATO to give to Ukraine. A lot of debate as to whether or not that would make a big difference, maybe more symbolic than otherwise. But Ukraine does have an air force. Russia has not been able to establish air superiority. This would prevent it, possibly allow for counteroffensives. But I keep looking at the map, and it hasn't changed in almost 2 weeks in terms of the offensives. You keep seeing that Russian forces are approaching Kyiv. They're outside Kharkiv. The only major city they've taken is Kherson in the south, the southern port town. The ships are supposedly approaching Odessa, but every military geek I know tells me that would be suicide if there's no land assault as well, and they don't seem to be anywhere near Odessa. Mariupol has been under siege for a long time. Every time civilians try to leave under promise of a ceasefire, it gets broken. The Russians apparently, at least reportedly, start firing on them, but it doesn't fall. Of course, the controversial Azov battalion is defending that for the most part. They are accused of being Nazis. A lot of real messy stuff in this war. Cluster bombs, vacuum bombs, Belarus. I mean, there's just so much going on. Protests in Russia. A woman who worked for the Russian media did a protest and has been fined for a recorded video. Has not yet been brought in for the actual protest that was on the air, apparently. Anyway, and arrests all across Russia. I don't know where to start, but let's get back to Zelensky's address to Congress and the response to it. Bipartisan support, $800 million going to him. What's next for Biden, Dave?
Well, thank you for that setup. It is tragic situation there, and depending on the source, your news source, you get a variety of different opinions. I think the more independent news sources have been reporting on the diplomacy side, but the mainstream media has been doing, to their credit, they report on everything. But the question is, what's the tone and what are the highlights? So, you wouldn't be too far off base to think that this speech today that Zelensky gave was intended not just for Congress, but for the American viewing audience to try to drum up more support. They're getting lots of support, but this is a particular request of his. So we'll start with like the speech itself. Zelensky did speak mostly in Ukrainian with the translator, where he spoke about basic human values. He referenced the patriots in the American tradition. He spoke directly to Biden in saying, "You're the leader of the nation, of your great nation. I wish you to be the leader of the world. Being the leader of the world means the leader of peace." And that's how he ended the speech.
He quoted Martin Luther King.
Exactly that, right? So he started saying, is the no-fly zone too much to ask? Basically because that's what he's being told by the West, because it might very well be that could be the first and last step to World War III. If there were shots fired in anger from a NATO air system on a Russian territory anti-aircraft missile battalion, which is what a no-fly zone is. So he said, well, then you know what's necessary on the battlefield. Help Ukraine, help Europe. And that's when he went into the Martin Luther King thing. And he said, I have a dream. These are words you guys know. And you know what I mean now that I just told you about what kind of armaments we want. You know what I mean when I say I have a need, I have a dream. So in a way, he kind of went off into just, well, what if mode. And he said, well, what if there was a global alliance called the U-24, where the 24 allied nations of Europe outside and I guess, and there's a big benefactor, the United States, outside of NATO, were to be this new association. And he said, quote, "A united for peace, a union of responsible countries that have the strength and the consciousness to stop conflict immediately." So this was his big pitch. And the truth is that he could be taken out at any time. So he really is. This is the role of his life. He played the president on TV, but the truth is that this is now it's way more than. And now he's trying to rally for the world. So what is he getting in return from the West, from the United States? There's a $13.8 billion total aid package that's already been put out, which is immense amount of resources. Militarily, like you said, they just upped a new. They did 200 billion the other day and 200 million the other day and 800 million today. So there's a new billion. And President Biden announced that, and I know I've been talking for a bit, but I think it's important to note that this specifically is 800 anti-aircraft systems, 9,000 shoulder-fired anti-armor missiles, so more anti-aircraft systems than planes they expect to see, more anti-tank weapons than tanks they expect to see by a big factor. Lots of small arms, 20 million rounds of ammunition, and drones. And then so people followed up with the U.S. Defense Department later and asked, well, what kind of drones are they? And they said, well, it's 100 of these drones. And they said, well, are they going to be, for intelligence, or are they going to be armed? And the quote from the U.S. official said, the ones we're giving are going to, quote, deliver a punch. Yeah. So I think the United States think they found a way to be the defenders of Ukraine's sovereignty, and at the same time try to thread the needle of not, getting us engaged in World War III.
Yeah, see, I'm not a military expert at all. I'm not even interested in it. I rely on geek friends that tell me this, and they tell me that the shoulder-held Stingers and the shoulder-held Javelins are much more importance to the Ukraine defense than the MiG jets. The MiG jets can be shut down by superior Air Force, but these things, you hide in trees and you come out and the jets go by and you take them down. That's just, the tanks are just sitting ducks, rolling coffins, they say. There's arguments that tanks are probably just should be removed from modern warfare, right? So to give 2,000 more of these and the rest, that's just terror. That's striking terror in the hearts of Russians right now, because they need the tanks to invade. Ukrainians are only using tanks within the cities to fight other tanks. They're not even leaving the city with them because they know it's suicide. So it's just. And this is sending a big message. So do they need the jets? Who knows? But I think it's symbolic to have NATO flying the jets in defiance of Russia. And I think that's what they want right now, is a show of strength.
I mean, I know we have very limited time left on this topic, but we are focused on the speech and the impact of the speech. And I think, like I said, the United States and the West is trying to thread the needle here, not escalate, but also the key thing is to not capitulate, and that's right. The struggle.
Yeah, we'll be talking about this in the weeks to come. Plenty more to say on it. And maybe we'll be having longer sections on this, but we've got other stuff to talk about too.
Friends, I'm proud to greet you from Ukraine, from our capital city of Kyiv, a city that is under missile and airstrikes from Russian troops every day, but it doesn't give up. And I have the honor to greet you on behalf of the Ukrainian people, brave and freedom-loving people who for 8 years have been resisting the Russian aggression. Those who give their best sons and daughters to stop this full-scale Russian invasion. Right now, the destiny of our country is being decided. The destiny of our people.
All right. Well, we've been discussing Supreme Court Justice. My prediction for Childs was wrong. The Supreme Court nominee, and I predict will be eventually the Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson is up. I thought there was going to be a bit less of a opposition to it, but it does look like that Republicans are going to make this into a culture war thing. She will be the first person who has been a public defender to be on the Supreme Court. I find that amazing, that here over, almost 2.5 centuries into this experiment, that this is the first time a defense lawyer has made it on. But the Republicans want to make a big deal of this. You don't defend criminals, right. And it's just like, and quite frankly, I don't think prosecutors should be on the thing. That's my view. But anyways, it's, you need people who are defending rights, but they are going to make a big deal of this. And, even though there's a lot of hypocrisy on it, Senator Graham is already making a big deal of a big issue of it, even though he already voted to put her on the D.C. circuit. But it's just, it's showmanship. Expect them to make a little bit of a circus of it. It may backfire because she is also very smart, and I think will handle the questions very well. And I do think that the American people understand what due process is and the need for it. But we'll see how the debate goes. Dave?
Yeah, I think again, I think your setup is spot on in the sense that she is the first public defender, and Republicans now more than ever, or now equally as much as ever for certain, just are taking the opportunity to be obstructionist and to just say, hey, look, we don't want anything that Biden does to pass. And at this point, like you said, there's this political theater element of it. So Senator Josh Hawley said, for lack of, it's not a quote here, but he's basically saying, like, do you regret that you helped get a Pennsylvania man off death row despite his involvement in 2 brutal murders? And there's not a really good way to say, look, I was defending him to try, that was my job. So it's a lack of respect, I think, for the role that a public defender or a defense attorney plays in our current process. But we've seen this before from other senators, Senator Tom Cotton from Arkansas, Senator Ted Cruz from Texas. They've used similar sort of grandstanding attempts before, and we for other judges, and we could expect to hear that in this case too. Also, not just defense attorney, but for U.S. criminal cases, but Judge Jackson. I'm not sure if she goes by a hyphenated last name, so we'll call her full name, Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson. She also defended in Guantanamo Bay criminals, basically people who were in prison there, and she's being attacked as saying, I'm trying to figure out who. The Republican National Committee on their background paper, it tried to block her nomination, said that her advocacy for these terrorists is, quote, going beyond just giving them a competent defense. Which, if you're a defense attorney and you're defending your client, what else can you really do? So it's really they're trying to craft language around ways to undermine her. And we could talk a little bit about her strategy for defense or her team's defense of her, but it's basically what you said, which is this is what this is what defense attorneys do in our system. So to trash her for doing her job is a critique on the system.
And I think that will be an interesting debate, because I've seen this come up on, in debates in public, and I think the Democrats, she's going to have to just basically take the high road and let the Democratic senators defend her. And I've seen this happen before, not with Supreme Court justices, but when they've been doing this in the lower hearings, and they basically attack the Republicans, saying, so you're saying that that criminal defendants are only entitled bad legal defenses, that they should only have bad attorneys defending them, right? Is that what your view of due process, that we should give them the bad, attorneys who don't do their work, and that they're not entitled to, full defenses, and really establish what that means, and reaffirm that the admonition from the judge way back 200 years ago, actually 250 years ago, who said that it's better that that 5 guilty murderers go free than 1 innocent murderer be killed. And a lot of people don't agree with that, but that is the wisdom of the system. And but that's a debate we have to have. It is in the election season, but it is not one that the Democrats can let go, and they just have to basically grab the bull by the horns and wrestle it to the ground and win that debate in an election season.
And to put a finer point on that, former Democratic Senator from Alabama, Doug Jones, is on the team that's trying to get her nomination through. And he said, and this is a quote, "She was a public defender, but that doesn't mean she's soft on crime or that she's pro-criminal." And then he went on to say, which I don't know how true this is, but it's the point that they're making in defense of her. There's not a single public defender who was pro-crime. They're defending the Constitution and the rights of folks.
Right, and due process, the concept of due process, and that's got to be their theme. Is she's believes in due process. They'll also emphasize that she's got the support of police chiefs across the country. She's got rulings as judge that are pro-crime, not pro-crime, but that are consistent with law and order. I mean, she's been vetted, she's been chosen, and for that, and again, she'll be able to defend herself. I think that Republicans are going to try to attack her on that because they don't have any choice. They've got to attack her on this. If she goes through without them trying to shed some blood, then Biden looks good. And they've got to make some type of attention on it, because then everything looks bipartisan. They've got to attack her, even if it's going to backfire. They cannot show that he did something bipartisan. They've got to show that there's a divide.
And to that point, it is red meat, blood in the water season. It's 2022. We have primaries coming up right around the corner, and they already started actually in some states. And then there's the congressional elections coming up. So Senator Mitch McConnell pointed out, hey, this judge has the support of progressives, which he said the soft on crime brigade is squarely in Judge Jackson's corner. So again, it's that political red meat that they're throwing to the base, getting the quotes, getting the quotes all lined up for the sound bites, etc., just to show that they're doing something, to try to make it political and not give Biden a win and hurt the other team, and it's part of the brand, but it's also not entirely unexpected. It's not
unexpected. I suspect there will be several Republicans voting for her, but just like there were Republicans voting for the impeachment, but that's okay. They just cannot make it look bipartisan, and they will attack the Republicans who voted for her for the lower court, of course, but nobody remembers that. They'll do it, but they cannot let anything look bipartisan at this point in time because that would hurt them for the midterms. They need to make it look like good, even though personally most of them probably have very little problem with her, other than the fact that she's a liberal justice. They probably are relieved that she was picked over several other people who would have been picked.
And to that point, I know we're wrapping up this segment, but she was confirmed in her current role, and so that she has gotten support before. And just to show you how this thing cuts both ways, one of the things they're going to probably criticize her for is her participation in a sentencing review commission. Well, when Donald Trump was president, one of the issues that he got credit for supporting was reviewing the criminal justice system and trying to bring some fairness into sentencing guidelines, as opposed to these, mandatory minimum sentences that are devastating to families around the country. So if the fact that somebody is thoughtfully assessing sentencing review guidelines, that shouldn't be a critique, but it's something else to bring into the critique of her.
Well, that takes us into a similar kind of topic for the next section. All right. Well, we are again in we are, despite the fact that the war has led to a certain kind of bipartisan unity around the war, a little bit of division over there, over that, but bipartisanship is not. We still have very partisan politics. We are in the midterms, and nowhere has the political climate been worse, more reflected than the treatment of Sarah Bloom Raskin, who was Joe Biden's nominee to become the top bank regulator at the Federal Reserve. And of course, she was vehemently opposed by the oil industry because she is very concerned about climate change, and was advocating policies that are actually already in effect at the Federal Reserve to kind of look at whether or not that certain policies, certain lending policies would have an impact on climate change. And even though her regulation would not be based on that, and she made that very clear, oil industry just doesn't want anyone like her in power. And so it was going to be unified. No Republican was going to vote for her. And then Senator Joe Manchin, who is basically owned by the fossil fuel industry, chimed in and said, I'm not going to vote for her either. And that pretty much killed her nomination. And so she withdrew yesterday. That's and we'll discuss a little bit later in the segment, kind of having an impact on some of the other nominations for Biden, who are wondering, okay, what is Manchin going to do next? But Dave, I'll let you comment.
Yeah, the nominee for the Fed's vice chair for supervision, that's a very important seat to have at the Federal Reserve. There aren't many Federal Reserve officers there, so this was right up there. And the idea that I think that we want to shoot down any nominee that Biden puts forward, you wouldn't think that would carry over into the Federal Reserve, but in this case it did, not because of her history, extensive history. Former Fed governor and deputy Treasury Secretary in the Obama administration, was very accomplished and capable. It's that she wrote an op-ed last year that said that regulators, and here's a quote, should ask themselves how their existing instruments can be used to incentivize a rapid, orderly, and just transition away from high emissions and biodiversity destroying investments. So in other words, she said, let's come up with a plan to pay for decarbonization, sort of punish people who are lending money towards that, or make it harder to lend money towards the existing system, make it easier for the transition to mitigate the climate-related costs to the financial system. So there's a lot in there, but basically just by proposing that we figure out a plan and put our, vote with our dollars, put your money. Everybody talks about markets, how markets are how we vote with our dollars. But in this case, just the debate, just the idea, just the fact that she wants to talk about this is being used against her. And so the Senate Banking Committee said they wouldn't advance her out of committee, and without the ability to leave committee, there's no chance for the Senate to even consider it. So that they even threatened actually to block the approval of Fed Chair Jerome Powell. So he's in an interim status right now, and they're basically saying unless Raskin polls, rescinds the nomination is rescinded for her, then we won't even approve Powell. So the fossil fuel industry drew a line in the sand and said, we're going to exert our power this way, and we're going to show you not to even talk about this stuff.
Yeah, now you're talking about the industry right now that is just loves the fact that, they can just jack up prices all they want for gasoline, and knowing that everybody's going to blame the president, even though they have plenty of supply. A lot of people don't realize, but that more oil has been drilled from during Biden's first year than was drilled during Trump's first year. That there's, no oil has been revoked. Permits have been revoked. They just has a moratorium on future, licenses. There's 9,000 that haven't even been acted on, permits to explore on federal land. And this whole thing about the Keystone Pipeline, which was mostly to take Canadian shale oil to the Gulf. It was an extension to sell to foreign countries, has really nothing. It's just it's a joke, and yet all of this is being blamed. If only we could have had that, we would have cheaper gasoline right now. As if this wasn't. And yet, so they get away with so much, and they get away with this. They've got a lot of power, and you have Manchin right now, as he's negotiating Build Back Better, saying, I don't know if I want anything in there supporting electric cars because, the thought of having to sit around waiting for electric recharging. I remember having to wait for filling up gas back in the 1970s. I don't like waiting in lines. I mean, it's such a stupid effing comment. It's just, and there he is. Right there.
I don't think I've ever heard you use that phrase even. So this must really get under your skin. The Manchin.
It's just anyway.
Harmed you.
But, and this is having impacts all the way around. I mean, the ambassador, nominations are under attack. And also now they're trying to push through Joe Biden's pick to head the Immigration Customs Enforcement, ICE, who is Sheriff Ed Gonzalez of Harris County, Texas, who is famous for introducing progressive solutions to mitigate issues of immigration. But they're basically through the sly accusing him of domestic violence because there is in a completely unrelated lawsuit pertaining to Houston College, an affidavit that alleges his wife, Melissa Gonzalez, is somehow related to something pertaining to domestic violence, doesn't name him or anything, just says that somehow she's a person of interest in something pertaining to domestic violence that she can't talk about because it's a whole thing. And she is trying to say it has nothing to do with my husband. He's saying, I don't even know what it's about. And yet they want to investigate it and bring it up and use it against him. I mean, it's absolute, Kafka stuff, right, going on right there to be used against him. And they've just got this climate that they can do this.
And so what you're referring to is that in the Homeland Security Committee, there was, I don't know if it was a whisper campaign or worse than that. I haven't gotten really too much clarity on that piece of it. But without a doubt, Senators Joe Manchin, Senator Mark Kelly, and Senator Catherine Cortez Masto, all three Democrats from West Virginia, Arizona, Nevada, respectively, they're saying, look, we're not going to advance this approval. We're not gonna do it until we get to the bottom of it. We need the information. We're gonna let the facts speak for themselves. This whisper campaign or this speculation about his involvement in domestic violence. The allegations can't go unanswered. We'll figure it out, and then we'll consider approving the nomination. So in a way, slowing down and shooting down another Biden appointee is being facilitated by Democrats who don't want to be on the wrong side of it,
who are in close elections and don't want to be hammered with it.
Yeah.
And that's understandable. But the fact that it's even being used, because it's an affidavit out of a lawsuit that has where his name doesn't appear anywhere in it. It's her. And she's trying to tell them, I can't talk about it, but it has nothing to do with my husband, and that's not enough for him.
So I think Arizona and Nevada, right? Those are close elections. But Manchin, for lack of a better word, he has lunch with Republicans, and they tell him what they're hearing, and then he brings it back to the Democratic side. So it's moderate Democrats kind of carrying water for Republican whisper campaign.
Yeah, but you had Ted Cruz for the longest time blocking all of the ambassadors because he wanted Biden to pressure Germany to block the pipeline that ended up being abandoned anyways because of Russia's invasion and the rest. But if Biden had caved to Ted Cruz on that, it might have made this alliance a lot more difficult, because what he wanted was for Biden to sanction companies that were involved with that pipeline, and that would have alienated Germany plus probably other European countries. Whereas when the invasion finally happened, Biden was able to go to Germany and say, you really need to shut this down, and Germany did it of their own accord rather than being pressed. I mean, it is a bad climate. This is McConnell. It was never this bad before McConnell. I'm just going to say that. All right, that takes us to the next topic. All right, speaking of the Federal Reserve, they issued their first rate hike for first time since 2018, half a point, in order to tame inflation, and unusually. Usually the Fed spooks a Fed rate hike, or even just talking about it will spook the Dow Jones, but actually the Dow Jones rose on it, I think because they want inflation to get under control. We'll see if it has supposed to have an impact on inflation. It won't probably not be right away, but down the road. And with oil prices soaring, oil prices have dropped over the past few days. I'm not quite sure what's happening with that. Maybe you've read something about it. I've heard there have been sell-offs, but oil continues to drop, even though we've got this shortage. I've heard it's related to China's Omicron, shortage. So that demand has dropped off, but also sell-offs on shares. Maybe the supply really isn't as bad as they thought it was. Maybe because Venezuela and other countries have stepped up supply. Maybe because people are not driving around as much because the prices got so ridiculous. Who knows? But gasoline prices are still high. They've only dropped off 1 or 2 cents average nationally. Expected to drop off more. Question is, how long will they stay? This might drop off as much as 20 cents, but we're getting into the spring where the summer demand might pick it up. But I don't know. I wonder if, when it gets so high where we're talking $6 a gallon or even higher, will American consumption habits finally change? Anyway, it's anybody's guess because nobody knows. I think economists are, you might as well be, a water witch or a Ouija board person as to what the impact's going to be. But it's generally accepted that the Federal Reserve raising the interest rates will have some mitigating effect on inflation, and that may benefit Democrats, for November, depending on how quickly the effect is. Especially if supply chain issues happen. Who knows what the economic impact of the war is going to be? Nobody knows. Everybody's speculating. Dave?
I know this sounds like a convoluted comparison, but when you look at people's across the country in the United States, threshold for tolerance for the stresses in the economy. One of the things that people were very upset about were the economic lockdowns because of COVID. People were very upset about the threats to liberty that came from masks and other vaccination mandates. But now that it's 2022 and it's time for an election year and all the marbles have to be put on the table, what did we see? We saw a concerted effort across the federal and state level from Democratic leaning states and leadership to acknowledge that upset and to transition us formally into a different direction. So, for example, California, I think, was the first state to say, okay, we're gonna roll back the emergency and kind of start to really address people's concerns. So with that in mind, what I'm saying here is with interest rates. So we're talking about interest rates, and there's lots of threats about inflation and the Federal Reserve doing stimulus because of COVID, doing increasing or continuing to maintain a very large balance sheet where their balance sheet is $9 trillion, which means these are things like government bonds and housing bonds and other instruments that the Federal Reserve becomes the buyer of last resort to keep money in the economy, to keep the money flowing. That's why the interest rates are so low, near zero for so long, to try to keep the economy stimulated and going. Well, with all this feedback and pushback that the economy is immensely stimulated and overheated and inflation is troubling, the Fed had to act. And so what they did was they laid out a plan to increase a 1/4 point per meeting for each of their 6 remaining meetings for the year, 3 more next year, to restore some degree of normalcy to that 2%. They're trying to get us back to 2% inflation and growth, and get us back down. The idea is full employment. So they're trying to thread the needle here and saying, well, there's nothing we could do to stimulate ever again. Eventually, we have to raise the rates. When are we going to raise them? We're going to raise them now. So they signaled, number one, that they're going to do the interest rate increase, and number two, that they're going to eventually, I think that here's the exact quote. In addition, the committee expects to begin reducing its holdings of Treasury securities and agency debt and agency-backed securities at a coming meeting. So they signaled we're not going to keep growing our balance sheet or keep it at this extraordinarily high level. We're going to try to return to normalcy. So I think that was a lot of what the markets responded to. And again, like you said, the economists, they can point to, there's tons of data out there, so you can defend any opinion that you have. I'm just saying that as far as rates go, I think that's the key. People responded positively to the signaling that they're going to take action to get this under control.
All right, and I just checked. You corrected me. Thank you. It was a 1/4 point, not a 1/2 point rate hike.
Only one Federal Reserve Federal Reserve officer decided to vote for a 1/2 point because he thought we should take a quicker step. But there's these charts. People predict, you can go to Bloomberg data and you could see what the expectation is, and the consensus was a 1/4, and so that was the predictability people wanted.
Now, of course, this makes loans more expensive because all the rates go up. People who are paying on variable interest rates are going to be paying a little bit more. Credit cards are going to be a little bit more, a little bit less money in the hands of consumers because they're going, and people with credit card debt it's going to be more difficult on them. I mean, this does have a cumulative negative effect on the economy, and I mean, that's what it does. That's why it has an impact on inflation. So it could reverse some of the job gains, and that Biden has been, bragging about, and the rest. And could it send us back into a double dip recession? Could we move back into the recession? That is the big question. It seems like this isn't like the desperate jumps in that they tried to do under Volcker and the rest back in the 70s and 80s, which were maybe trying to do too much at once. This is a very gradual 0.25% over the time, and they could always change it. If they do it that gradually, they could, if they had to do that, if things started to get really bad. But it is, as you say, return to normalcy, returning to interest rates that are regular. Maybe some of the housing market has been overheated, in the past. We've certainly seen it around here in Humboldt County at times. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, but everybody wants to see gas prices come down.
Yeah. So if I may, you mentioned oil, and and so it did reach a peak of close to $130 a barrel, which is, I guess 30% more than it is right now. So there was this drastic peak because World War III in the air is a big deal. Russian oil being more and more difficult to sell in the market is a big deal. So it wasn't clear if the West would be able to negotiate with OPEC, given that OPEC plus, that plus is Russia. And so what's going to happen to their 4 or 5 million barrels of oil per day? It wasn't clear. But oil already sells much, much higher than it costs to take out of the ground and distribute. So it's a profitable product at this price point, at a price point significantly lower than this one. So it's not the cost of the oil right now that is swinging rapidly upwards in the face of the potential threats of war expanding outside of the localized war. It's greed and it's fear. And so if you can make extra money and people are fearful, there's a lot less pressure for the price not to just shoot up and go almost parabolic like it did. But with the West getting involved, in the United States in particular, in speaking with Venezuela, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, some of these other places that produce quite a bit of oil, it's not that in an 80 million barrel a day market, it's not that challenging to replace 5% if you all things being equal, if you got consensus. So the fact that it's being talked about is part of the reason why I think there was some lowering of the price. And then, we could talk more about that. There's a whole threat to the existing world order that potentially, an alliance between China and Russia could have. That fear is in the air. So people say we could have $200 barrel oil tomorrow if ... right? So we're not out of the woods in any way. When it comes to gasoline, gasoline is a totally different animal. It's produced locally. It's a byproduct of oil. The price is that is really it's market driven. It's not an internationally traded commodity. It's a localized product that, again, fear and greed.
Okay. Well, we'll probably be discussing that more, and we will discuss follow-up as to the impact of the Federal Reserve actions taken today.
I, Richard Billhouse Nixon, do solemnly swear.
I, Gerald R. Ford, do solemnly swear.
I, Jimmy Carter, do solemnly swear.
I, Ronald Reagan, do solemnly swear.
I, George Herbert Walker Bush, do solemnly swear.
I, William Jefferson Clinton, do solemnly swear.
I, George Walker Bush, do solemnly swear.
I, Barack Hussein Obama, do solemnly swear.
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear.
I, Joseph Robinette Biden Jr., do solemnly swear. So help me God.
Okay, that takes us to our last segment. We are going to be discussing a lot of the Senate and House races and probably governor races as we get into the election season. But of course, as there's a battle over the Senate majority, and it's going to be probably very close. One of the more important races is in Georgia, race between current Senator Warnock, who was elected 2 years ago in a special election, and now this will be for a 6-year term if he can be reelected. But he is up against a very strong challenge. The Trump-backed Herschel Walker, very famous football running back, very popular, and African American, popular, probably getting in the polls a lot of support from working class African Americans, untested in the political sphere, and it has went out into the public and at a church made some comments about evolution, which is probably not going to hurt him outright, but does definitely show that he does not have political handlers yet. He talked about evolution in terms of, well, if we came from apes, why are there still apes? That is an old question, and it's easily dealt with, by people who, kind of like, well, if the first colonist Americans came from Englishmen, why are there still Englishmen, right? It's just that kind of a thing. But if you explain evolution, first of all, we didn't come from apes. We have a common ancestor with apes, and the rest. But I'm not going to go into the science. He also says scientists don't have a concept of babies, and actually we do. Scientists do have a concept of babies, but that's a whole other issue, and the rest. Also, he's facing, now that he's out in the race, is his opponent, his Republican opponent, is now releasing the affidavits filed by his ex-wife of domestic abuse. I don't know what the truth is of that, but welcome to politics, Herschel. I mean, that's, he's out there, and there are a lot of questions about whether or not he has the personality that can handle a race. He's known for tempers. He's known for not being able to keep it together. We'll see. We'll see. We'll know whether or not he has the capacity to do this. Apparently, he has kind of lost it in public appearances before. But you get older, you get better at things. He's not a football player anymore, a young football player. He is now older, wisdom mellowed out. He's not. This isn't. He's not amped up after a football game. He's where he's complaining about officials or whatever it was that led to these rumors. So we'll see. I understand he's ahead in the polls, and you have some information about that, Dave.
Yeah, so I'm looking at RCP, Real Clear Politics, and they're an aggregation site similar to 538 in many ways, but they do it their own way. So they'll put in the most recent polling averages. They'll tell you when they were. They'll tell you who ran it and the sample size, margin of error, all that, and then they come up with an average. So as of right now, just before I go to the primary, just Herschel Walker's general position as the leading Republican candidate, and Trump has endorsed him. He and Warnock are within the margin of error. So the margin of error is like a 2-3% depending on the poll right now. And so some polls have Herschel Walker up by 2 points or 3 points, but when you average them all together with a PPP, which is pretty reputable, it brings him down to 1 point. So like 47.5 to 46.5. So that's a tie with Warnock. They're, like I said, or meant to say, their primary is May 24th. So it's still a few months away. There's still time.
For the Republicans.
The Republican primary is like I said, May 24th. So he's facing the guy that ran the ad. His last name is Black, Gary Black. Herschel Walker has like a 60-point lead over him right now. Across all polls, it's 57 to 64. So it's huge. With 66, and this is early, like I said, but with 66 points favoring him versus Black has like 6.3, King 2.7, Sadler 2.3, Clark nothing. So even if you add up all the opposition, he still has a very sizable lead. And so it's in that light where he, like you said, maybe he's not tested yet. So what Gary Black has done is prepared an ad campaign, and I'm not going to give out because it's a negative campaign. I'm not going to give out the link to it, but you could find it. It basically accuses Herschel Walker of disqualifying behavior, makes lots of allegations. It trumps up the charges, for lack of a better word. So with that in mind, that Herschel Walker has this huge advantage over his competition in the Republican primary that's coming up in May, his primary opponent, Gary Black, has produced an ad campaign that accuses him of disqualifying behavior. And so, I'm not going to give out the URL link. You can find it. You type in Herschel Walker disqualifying behavior in a Google search. I'm sure you'll be able to watch this video. There's lots of disparaging comments about Herschel Walker's prior behavior related to what Eric had said, domestic violence, etc. And then they ask almost like this rhetorical question. So we have to wonder, how many more women are out there? What stories might they tell? Ask yourself, are you still thinking about voting for Herschel Walker? And then they go on to say more bad things about him. So he's now, it's like you said, Eric, welcome to politics. This is where it's at, and he's going to take a lot of heat, I think, for some of these allegations against him. That's kind of where he's at right now.
I mean, this guy, whoever doesn't. He's doing Warnock a real favor. Warnock doesn't have to do it, he doesn't get blamed for it. And part of the analysis that says that Warnock may actually behind the polls be in the lead is that there are a number of African American voters who support Herschel Walker because they don't know what his positions are. They just support him because he is a hero, to them. But once they start learning where he's at, they're going to say, "Oh, well, hey, you're a great football player, but yeah, no, and it's going to be that way." It's very interesting. His evolution position probably won't hurt him in the primary because I've got some interesting numbers here too, and I find this fascinating. In 1975, 67% of Democratic voters expressed confidence in science, a number that increased to 79% last year. In contrast, in 1975, 72% of Republican voters expressed confidence in science, more than Democrats by 5 percentage points. That number collapsed to 45% last year. So, it's not, I don't, know that his position in evolution is really going to hurt him all that much, especially if anybody makes a big deal about it. Now, Warnock will probably not push it too much, because you don't want to come off as being an elitist, especially in a state like Georgia. But he will point out and say, "Look, please, our children are watching this. Please educate yourself." That's what he'll say. It'll be an appeal to that. It's the evolution doesn't talk about us evolving from apes. They say that we have a common ancestor. He turns, do it into that as a, it makes an educational moment out of it. And Warnock is good at that. So it'll be very interesting to see how this happens, but I think just in general, I think Republicans, they are a little frustrated that they're not further ahead in a lot of these polls right now. I mean, they should be further ahead right now with the way the economy is, and the economy probably isn't going to get any worse at this point, unless something really bad happens with a war or something like that. But inflation is probably not going to get much worse at this point. Certainly not with what the Fed is doing, and and the supply chain is not going to get worse. Most likely, it's just going to get a little bit better each time. So what are they going to have? The culture war. That's really what they've got left.
Yeah, and that's funny that you point this out. I know we're getting near the bottom of our time here, but when Herschel Walker was first discussing running and that name was getting floated, there were GOP senators who had reservations about it. So Senator John Cornyn said, "Hey, some of the stories we're hearing about him are pretty bad. Obviously, this is a quote, some of it's pretty bad, obviously. Physical abuse and pulling a gun on his wife, if that's true." And then just kind of like he didn't want to speculate how bad that would be. And also Minority Leader Mitch McConnell said, "I want him to win that race. And to the extent that he's handicapped by some of these things, that would make that unlikely. I'd prefer to have somebody else." So it might be too late for them to do something about it, but he's not got a lot of support from GOP leadership, which could be pretty telling about his chances of actually winning the general election against a sitting senator.
Okay, Dave, what have you got for us?
Well, today, earlier in our conversation, you spoke a little bit about the idea of there being jets, MiG jets that came from Poland and some of the other Eastern European countries to be at the disposal of Ukraine to defend themselves, and how that might not even be necessary from a military strategic perspective. I also said that, the West and the United States are trying to thread the needle and not be the facilitators of that. Like Poland said, "Oh yeah, we'll send them to Germany, and then you can fly them from Germany over to Ukraine." And I think Putin has expressed in so many uncertain terms that that's an act of war. The United States doesn't want to be the one who escalates to that level of confrontation. So we are restrained and constrained by the high road in this situation. And so the fact that we've agreed to send 100 drones today that have offensive capacity leads me to believe that there's not going to be the MiG story probably has run its course, and that the United States will succeed in delaying any kind of entry as long as possible, and try the best as the West can do not to escalate that air combat over Ukraine.
Okay, well, that's pretty good. Although he did refer to Putin as a war criminal, and so that is escalating the thing. Well, I mean the rhetoric anyway.
But that's sorry to interrupt you, but that's because the attack on civilians. The International Criminal Court is sending over an investigator. That things we've seen on TV and Zelensky's own video showed.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, showed what are actually considered technically.
No, absolutely justified.
Yeah.
All right, less serious. The daylight savings, Senate passed what is referred to as the Sunlight Defense Act, and universally, all senators voted for it, and which would basically extend daylight savings to all year long. This was done once before, by the way, in 1974. Didn't last long. It was brought back. I don't even remember why. It didn't work out for whatever reason. It now goes to the House, but there's not any indication that Nancy Pelosi is going to act on it anytime soon. My prediction is she's not going to act on it at all. I think that there are a lot of reasons why people don't want, certain interests don't want this to happen. And, there would have been a lot of resistance to it. I think it was a feel-good thing for the Senate to pass. Personally, I'm one of the few people who don't mind it switching halfway through the year, but I'm one of those people who likes, Christmas fruitcake. Other people like to pass it around. I actually like it and eat it. It actually goes good with sharp cheddar cheese. But anyways, it's just, I'm one of those weird people. But it's, I could be wrong, but I don't think the House is going to act on it. I think this was something the Senate did just to feel good. But we'll see. It was unanimous, though, so we'll see. Anyway, we will be back. We will be discussing the war next time. We'll probably dedicate 2 sessions to it. We will be back on the topic of the redistricting, and we'll probably dedicate most of a particular show to it sometime in the very near future, because there is a lot of news in there, and it's going to have some impact on the midterms. But until next time, stay informed and stay engaged.